Here you have one of the many anthems. Break DJ Lacey brought to the table.
Tournament 7.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a Korean lever and don't know the difference between, say, a JLF tension and a Korean grommet, like a silicone rubber grommet, check out my first Korean lever roundup where I cover the Crown 309 series and the 303DX along with the Taeyoung Fanta. Anyway, today the selections we're going to be going through for these Korean levers are actually all from Korea, other than one technically because I bought it through Focus Attack, but all the other ones I got from IST. First one we're going to be starting off with is the Fanta 29GN. I actually got this just on a whim just to see what it was like. From there, we have the Kaze V3. Now, there's a black line on the bottom of this one. It doesn't come with the Kazes. There is a reason why I actually did that, and I wanted to cover up some imperfections. The next one is the Taeyoung Fanta. A lot of people have been telling me about this lever. It's way better than the Myeongshin. It's one of the most authentic ones, so I figured it was time to finally try one out. And finally, the Fujin V3. God damn, is this thing sexy! I love this fucking thing. You guys have been really pretty direct about how you guys wanted me to really take a look at the Fujin V3, either it was on Discord, Facebook, Instagram, even here on YouTube. And damn, you guys make me spend all this fucking money. So now that introductions are out of the way, you know what levers are featured in this video, I'm going to be able to talk about each lever individually, talk about their pros and cons, and actually I'm going to try to give a sample like situation that you guys can relate to and just use as a frame of reference. If you get one of these levers, you can try it from yourself and see if you have the same situation I did. So after I'm done talking about all the levers, I'm going to give my personal opinion. This time I'm going to be talking about some tension options because I wanted one of each, a total of 4 grommets. But they ended up sending me 4 of each grommet. So I have 16 grommets I have no idea what I'm going to do with now. And you know, by the time that... Hey, don't forget, you need a 35mm hole to fit in your fight stick, pleb. You're right. We're going to start this off with the Fanta 29GN. Fanta 29GN is pretty much the solid JLF when it comes to tension since it uses the lightest grommet provided by IST. I couldn't think of how to explain it in voiceover, but I did while I was playing on it, so here we go. So the one thing about the lightest grommet that you're going to notice the most, it allows you to have a lot more control, but at the same time, you don't have that same really snappy, speedy Gonzalez back to neutral. When you do the wave dash, for example, you hit the forward and then, you know, do the Hadoken and then the forward again. And I use the tension that's right here on the other grommets, for example, because once you start moving it, you start feeling a little bit more tension. You get a better idea where your neutral is. When it comes to using a super light grommet like this, it's a lot harder to find that area because, you know, it's just so light. But it can be also a plus because your movement can just be a lot faster in general. But like I said before, you can get some missed inputs because it's so light. Every so often when I'm doing wave dashes on 2-player side, I'll hit up every once in a while. Oh, there it goes. Just because like I sometimes rest my thumb on it sometimes to bring it back down and I'll press it up by accident. You can pretty much teach yourself how to not do it. Ah, bitch. Get that on the floor. Fuck you, Claudio. The Fanta 29GN has a 70mm throw distance, which is the same as the Myeongshin Fanta, and also has the A2 Gersung switches. This Fanta is sporting a green bat top, which is way cleaner than the Myeongshin I previously owned, but still shares the same imperfection where I assume it's just where it separates from the mold. As for the actuator, it has a 14.5mm side and a 15.5mm. This means you can actually flip the actuator for different points for activation on the switches. Personally, I prefer a more tension lever, but this Fanta variant may have opened my mind to a less tension setup due to its overall feel and control. I see this fitting for somebody coming from a JLF that wants to convert to a full-size Korean lever but want to keep that similar tension to a JLF. The second may be looking for something with a long throw for deep corners while retaining less effort to commit to a direction. Next, we're going to take a look at the Kaze V3, which is quite different from the other levers, sporting a 10mm shaft resulting in a 67.5mm throw, which is the shortest throw in the roundup. Since the Kaze has the least travel distance throughout the throw, it can be considered to be faster than the other levers. For example, Dragunov's Quarter Circle 2 Instant Route Running 2 can be a little easier to pull off since you can hit multiple forwards with less distance returning back to neutral, though it may not be as easy as the Fanta GN with its less tension, but you do trade the overall loose feeling for something more in the middle as it comes with the blue tension grommet. Adding to that tension are the Gersung Kaze switches, which practically feel the same as Gersung A3's, accompanied by a Sama style red bat top. Unfortunately, this is my least favorite bat top as it tends to spin in my hand during play and doesn't stick to my hand very well either. I end up sanding down the finish for a bit more grip, which helped, but not as much as I'd hoped. I used to have a Sama style bat top like this one. I also didn't like that one either, so it may be coming down to personal preference. The actuator is similar to the Fanta GN, having a 16mm side and a 14.7mm side, but I recommend just staying on the bigger end since the smaller end tends to actuate switches only while touching the collar, which has diagonals about as tight as Alicia Keys and fishnets. In a way, I do feel like this is a Fanta form factor version of a crown style lever, having a shorter throw due to the bigger shaft, heavier bat top to manipulate the weight, and having the same size actuator at least on the bigger end. The Kaze is definitely for someone who's looking to have a little less travel and less force required for movement, but not as loose as the Fanta GN or not as tough as the Taeyoung. So if this sounds like you, I definitely give it a try. Next up is the Taeyoung Fanta, which is known to be one of the original Korean levers that's been updated for 2019. While playing on this lever, it seems the corners are a bit more distinct as the opening on the collar is wider than the others. This may be a big plus for those of you playing on 2D fires as corners on a Korean lever are a main complaint. With that said though, I can already see people being turned off by its tension as it uses the 45A black silicone grommet, which is the heaviest grommet provided by IST. In my experience, the fatigue was most noticeable when I was practicing back-to-back down forward 2 electric launches. Those of you not experienced with this kind of stiffness may have pull noodles for forearms for a bit, but over time you can adapt to the overall stiffness of the grommet while being rewarded with a fast return to neutral. The Taeyeung sports about a 70.5mm throw. I say about because I couldn't get an exact measurement, and the softer A2 switches like its Fanta brothers. As for the actuator, it's a 15.5mm and 14.5mm, which can also be flipped like the others. And finally, to top it all off, no pun intended, a red textured back top, which is probably one of my favorites other than the Fujin. After playing on a range of levers, I can see what the others were trying to mimic. The deep corners from the long throw, the fast return to neutral, in turn having a recognizable area of neutral due to the nature of the high tension grommet. The Taeyoung, along with the Myeongshin Fanta, are usually referred to the OG Korean levers and set the baseline qualities of what makes a Korean lever a Korean lever. It's not underrated, it's not overrated, it just simply sits right in the middle. If you're looking for an alternative to the Myeongshin and the characteristics I mentioned earlier tickle your fancy, then hit up this OG for a run through the bracket. And finally, the Fujin V3. I've been asked about this lever quite a lot ever since I teased it in my Quamba Dragon review. I mean, just look at it, it's so beautiful. The Fujin has the sturdiest build out of any of the levers here, from having the least amount of play in the lever, tighter clearance making for considerably less wobble, least amount of dead zone, and the metal switch plate keeping the switches from flexing whatsoever and being level on the actuator. Compared to the Myeongshin, notice I didn't say Taeyoung because this is basically a modified Myeongshin, but it's like going from a base model car to a sportier version, though still relying on that base model frame just with performance taking priority. But this overall solid build, along with the Myeongshin 45A rubber grommet, makes it my most tension lever in my entire collection thus far. In my experience, my quarter circles were probably the most noticeable as I needed to put more effort going from down forward to forward, especially if I needed to do it quickly. But on the flip side for me, when I do instant air dive kicks, I can do the motion, slightly loosen my grip for neutral, and then follow up with another starting from down forward. The Fujin shaft and collar combination results in a 72mm throw being the longest of the three. It comes with a frosted bat top which does fade to a clear finish over time, A3 Gersung switches, and finally the 14.5mm actuator, which isn't stepped like the other ones. The OG levers may have a high tension grommet, but allows for some flexibility throughout the lever compared to the Fujin, where it pretty much bathes in its overall tighter feel and higher tension. Without really saying much, I can see this fitting somebody who wants a high tension or long throw setup, but if this was your first Korean lever, I probably would push you away to something more simple. So as you can tell, this lever is pretty much tailored to a certain kind of player. So if you want to skip the gym and do your workouts on the Fujin, it would definitely be a great substitute. So very quickly, I just want to touch on something about the measurements. I use a digital micrometer, so they're not exact, but I just wanted a reference or something you guys can see where you can tell the difference between each lever. Now I'm just going to speed through some things you should look out for when you're putting these levers into your fight sticks. For example, the Taeyoung, this sounds awfully familiar. The Taeyoung Fanta's collar is a little bit over 35mm, and if you say cut the 35mm hole in your fight stick yourself, it may be a little tight if you didn't cut it wide enough, but if you already have like a Korean fight stick, it should be just fine. I put it in my Quamba Dragon, but when I bolted it up, it was pretty much stock, so it wasn't anything to be really concerned of. So let's say you don't want to cut a 35mm hole into your fight stick. There are some people out there that are starting to make short collar mods. You have Arcade Stick Indonesia that are making short collar mods. Now personally, I haven't messed with them, but they are becoming more available. I know I teased the Fujin V3 short collar, but it is hard to find and it is pretty expensive, so I wouldn't say people to jump to that immediately. But I will say that Korean manufacturers seem to be taking into account for Japanese fight sticks, coming out with a lot more short collar levers and no collar levers. So it looks like you might not even need the mods or maybe even a full collar lever in the future. Moving on to these. These are similar to like when you use a Sanwa JLF when you have a 1 pound, 2 pound, or 4 pound spring. It's similar to that and it's the same idea. If you get the ones from IST, I can't speak from other ones because these are just the ones I have. You have a lot more options. You can go from high, medium, low, and then low. You have a lot more steps to take, so you don't go from like a big jump, and maybe you just want something that's right in the middle. So say if you're playing on the Fujin V3 and you're like, ah man, this tension is really getting to me, but I love everything else about it, you can just drop it down to whatever one you feel like is gonna be fitting for you. So wrapping things up, the Fanta 29 Gen just easily caught me off guard. Now I can actually consider trying out the light tension grommet in different levers and seeing if I like it to get that overall control and just like that loose feeling overall. And as I mentioned before, you JLF players will probably love this one for being the most close in tension to your JLFs and just will provide you with fuck. When I was heading out to Evo, there were two options that I had on levers. I had the Kaze V3 and the Fujin V3. The Kaze V3 was what I was mainly playing on beforehand, and then I switched to the Fujin and I never looked back. The Kaze V3 just simply isn't for me. Everything that I look for in lever just not there in the Kaze personally. But I did bring it to a local, they played on it, and they kind of wanted it right on the spot. This lever suits a lot of people, but it just doesn't suit me. The Taeyoung Fanta is easily the middle ground for any Korean lever. It's a benchmark for any Korean lever. The higher tension is definitely something that can be a toss-up for some people if you really want that return back to neutral. This was definitely right up my alley. And finally, the Fujin V3, which has been sitting in my Qualmo Dragon ever since I got back from Evo, and I played on it while I was at Evo. It's just been my lever of choice. Even actually when I got the Fujin, I got rid of my entire Crown series and my Myeongshin because I liked it so much. I actually was planning on just keeping this as my only lever, but then I was like, you know what, I want to jump into the Fanta side of levers and see how they feel. And this is why this video was birthed. I wasn't really planning on doing a second roundup video. So what you can see coming from me in the future probably is going to be a button roundup. I pretty much bought every button from everybody. I want something lighthearted, man. These Korean lever roundups are really hard to do sometimes. Thank you, Korean Grommet Sniffer Discord. You guys have been a big help for a video like this and just giving me a lot of feedback and a lot of love. So you guys are awesome. And what I want to make very clear, levers in general are subjective as f. I got like hella quiet when I said that. The reason why I say that is because there's not one lever that rules all. There's not one that's better than the other. There's not one that's completely going to demolish the other just because you're playing on it. You and your dedication, that's going to make you a better player. Or you could just end up like a scrub like me and try something new. Peace out. Until next time.
Welcome to the revolution. Hey, come on,